Okay, we have had 1 minute of charity for latecomers. I suppose it's time to get the show on the road. Let me check. So we have Manu and we have Mutasami. So we have both the presenters. And we have me, which is actually first presenter. That's good. Hello, everyone. I do miss the hello, chairman, or something. Seeing that people are actually awake, but you can't win them all, I suppose.
Hello, Chairman. We're awake.
Nice to see you again. So it's a bit like speaking into the void when you do this. But anyway, we're at the ITF. We're at the working group meeting. We have a working group. It's called Media Man. We have an hour. And the first thing to do is always note well. We've all seen it before. If you haven't, then you really need to read it. And there are rules. If you follow the rules, the internet works better. If you don't follow the rules, well, the ITF is certainly going to work slower. So let's follow the rules and make progress. So 1 hour of agenda. And we've got basically 3 things to talk about. One is as in order of importance of the charter. It's principles for new top-level types. It's the haptics top-level type proposal. And it's a question of multiple suffixes for media types. So I allocated about 15 minutes for each. But first, we have the traditional moment of silence. We need someone to sign up to be scribe. Do we have a volunteer? Okay, Phil Hallenbaker is volunteering. Thank you, Phil. And I do see this hedge doc thing that I have never seen before. If you take notes for yourself, then you have to upload them afterwards somewhere. So let's get into business. Principle for new top-level types. So for those who haven't been here as long as I have, a little bit of history. When I walked into the ITF in 1991, one of the first things I encountered was the discussion on how do we have multiple media types inside mail. And the result was RFC 1341. It was adopted in various places, including email, of course, and also NetNews, HTTP, RTP, and so on. After a while, we figured out that registration procedures were important. I can't spell. And broke them out into RFC 2048 and revised them a couple of times. And if you read them from a sociological viewpoint and not strictly as a technical viewpoint, you will see that we have made many attempts at directing how media types should be used, what the principles are, and what people should do when register them. Well, I wouldn't say that all those attempts were successful. The world does as the world does. So one of the big discussions in 1991 was between, should we have flat space of types, or should we have a hierarchical? And the thing we landed on was a 2-level type system, where you had a top-level type and a subtype. And this was actually a compromise. So when we grew up a little more, we found out that some types were standard and some were not standard. And perhaps we should actually show those into the names. So we went with the faceted namespace with vendor and prefix and personal, and as separate from standards. This was, I would say, not a roaring success. People didn't see very much use for those prefixes, and thought that it was much nicer just to squat on a name until everyone agreed that this was the name to use. And we did structured suffixes, which had slightly more uptake, with the plus XML being the first suffix and the premier suffix for some time. And there have been a few other suffixes registered. So for top-level types, we had the original set: text, image, video, audio, application, message, multipart. I forgot to write that down. We added model in 1997, and nobody cares. Added example in 2006. Why should anyone care? And we added font in 2017, which was kind of, well, someone was already using it, so we should just admit it. So this comes by. So new top-level types are rare. I mean, we go 10 years without adding one, easily. But it's still unclear why we add them, and it's still unclear how we measure whether it was good or not. So this was a brief look back at history. So if you look at the charter for this working group, my personal opinion is that that one of the success criteria for working group is that it ends. And so when this working group is concluded, if we have something that we can point to, saying this is how we decide if we need a top-level type, that's success. And I mean, if what we point to is a document saying the decider decides, that's okay too. But I do think that we can do slightly better. So with that, I'll just open the floor, open the queue, and see who wants to comment on criteria for top-level types. Callum, please speak up.
This is more a question actually for you, Harold, or anyone who has the experience in this long time. It seems to me that in the way these are actually used, that you could actually remove the top level type and it would make absolutely no difference to anything. Like it's not like the subtypes ever managed to conflict, that we had two subtypes that had the same different top levels. I understand how people use the subtypes. Yeah, sure, you want to know it's an image JPEG, but as long as we don't ever, name an audio format JPEG, I don't know. So this just comes back to, does this actually matter in practical use in any way whatsoever?
Well, I could actually make the opposite argument, that they're harmful. We have a couple of subtypes that exist in multiple namespaces for RTP reasons, because so we have
these are like redundancy type and forward encoding type, like error recovery mechanisms that would work for multiple different types of media. Are those the ones you're thinking of?
Yes, and there's a particular text type that people wanted multiplexed. I just can't.
The T140 stuff, or
T140. That's one I think of. That we registered 3 times because it had to be a top level type, and the design decisions in SDP were forcing us to register multiple times if we wanted them multiplexed. Now we fixed that. So there are things that have the same name in multiple spaces, yes, but they're not conflicts as far as we know. Okay, Phil.
I was going to say what Cullen just said, and when he said it, I suddenly realized that actually he's wrong. Sorry. There is one case in which the top level type is actually used, and it's inside the web browser, in that there's a content negotiation scheme in there. And so it does actually make sense to negotiate between, I've got this image in 3 different formats. You can have it in JPEG, PNG, or GIF. And so if it is used anywhere at all, that is where the top level thing is used, and not necessarily in the browser. It's possible that it is used in the servers and the platforms underlying. But if not, if it's not used there, it probably isn't used anywhere, and you can just ignore it.
Johnson, I think you have an RTP, can explain the RTP situation better than me.
I probably could, but that's not what I came to talk about here today. What I was actually going to ask is, I think, if you do want to ask, but the RTP thing was kind of, as far as I know, a hack, which is that somebody noticed that the M-line formats that SDP was using, where this happened to match the media types they were using for MIME, and said, "Oh, hey, we should make these the same thing," which I'm not positive was a good idea. But because the packetization for file formats and packetization for RTP encoding are really not the same thing at all. But what I was actually going to ask is, I seem to recall when the thing with the font top level type came around, that somebody was claiming that various content inspection tools are more paranoid about things labeled applications / they are about other types, even if they're unknown types, that they think, oh, this is something that could be active content, I'm going to reject it, whereas something that is not, application / I'm going to be more, tolerant of, because it's probably something that's safe. That's why the people wanted font / rather than application / or whatever. Is that true, or was that me misunderstanding or misinformation at the time, or rumor, or what? Anybody know?
They got it into the text of the RFC. That's all I know.
Just probably a little slight answer to that. I think that I know firewalls, content protection systems used to look at that long ago. I'm not sure they had very intelligent things to do with it. They probably checked that if you pretended a JPEG was audio, that vice versa. But the type of firewall is pretty much gone at this point. I don't even know who makes them anymore. So if it was, I suspect that information is becoming rapidly not true.
There was a series of hacks that involved sending something with a particular media type or file name suffix, and then having the content be content sniffed by the dispatcher, which would then happily dispatch it to something that was completely different from the content type. So, I mean, insecures want to be insecure. Phil?
Just following on from what Colin says, yes, the perimeter firewall's gone, but there is actually a firewall inside the platform in many cases. So it's possible that it is used there. Again, I'm not a strong advocate for it.
Alexei?
Yeah, just repeating something that was mentioned in chat by Ned and myself is that top level type is used in, among other systems, in email systems, deciding top level processing for certain groups of things. So yeah, I don't think eliminating it is going to be useful at this point. We can decide we don't want to create more categories. That would be a fair discussion. But I think removing and making everything being equally registerable under any top-level media type, that would not be a good thing, probably.
Yeah. So I think that we're more or less saying that we have liked top-level types before because they're pretty, and nobody really cares what the top-level type is. They care about the whole string, or at least that's what they should be doing. Jonathan?
Actually, that's not true. If you know it's a multi-part, you want to handle it very differently from the rest of it, and you can do it generically in many cases. So yeah, that's not what you said.
I think certain top level types get special treatment, but there's everything would have everything else but anyway, right? There's nothing is probably going to panic if it sees a top level type it doesn't know about. It'll just say this is treat this like a like in everything else. So I guess my question is, if we don't care about top level types, it seems like the two choices we could make were never have any new top level types, or sure, everyone can have a top level type, register Google / if you want. So I think, or maybe not quite that free form, but a pretty open IANA registry, if we don't care about top level types, would seem to be a friendlier choice than no, everything in the future forever is going to go under application if it's not one or the other.
Yep. So I'm going to claim that we're closing the queue just about now. So just to keep on schedule, and we have a perfectly worked example of a new top-level type coming up as the next item. Jonathan, were you finished? Karen, you have the last word.
Okay, I just want to. I'm not saying that this changes any conclusion on what we do on this, but like the multi-part thing is the top level doesn't matter. It's the multi-part mix, multi-part parallel. Those matter. I mean, the thing has to understand the sub-level. It's not the top level that matters in email. Yes, the top level, it checks the string because it expects the string to be there, but it doesn't really need it in any way, because it's not like it deals completely. If it sees a second level after multi-part, it doesn't understand. There's nothing it can do with it, right? It might as right. And similarly with scanning email and everything, you have to understand the subtype. It's all the subtype that's being understood, not, as long as the subtypes didn't conflict, the top level doesn't actually do anything for any email scanner or firewall scanner I've ever seen. So, because they have to understand the subtype to be able to do anything with it. So, I mean, I think if we're going to design something here that's going to be good, or we're going to argue strongly there's a strong design constraint somewhere or another, we would have to just find a use case that really required you to understand the top level, but be able to totally ignore those sub levels underneath of that. And no one's brought one up here. So I think that makes a strong argument. This doesn't matter much one way or another, whatever we do. Thanks.
Yeah. Alexei, was that a response or you just left in the queue?
Yes, it's a response. Actually, both Ned and myself are screaming. That's not correct. I can handle any multi-part /foo in my WebML client just fine without knowing what it is. And this is handled by knowing it's a multi-part slash. So there aren't that many examples of things like this, but there are examples.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the discussion. I will now switch slide sets if I can figure out how to do that. Stop slide share and haptics share. Mr. Mutsuzami.
Yes, Harold, thank you. Next slide, please.
Yep.
Okay, I thought I would start off with a quick introduction. So haptics refers to the generation of touch-related sensations. It is used in a wide range of consumer devices, mobile devices, automobiles, gaming, and haptic technologies require some kind of actuation to actually create the tactile sensation. In game controllers and mobile devices, that's typically a small vibrating motor of some kind, the haptic actuator. In large automotive touchscreens, these are specialized piezoelectric materials. Haptic capabilities are now pretty commonplace in every modern smartphone, game, VR controllers. The latest and the best example is the Sony PS5 DualSense controller, and pretty much all of the late model iPhones and Android types. And the version 2 of the Internet Draft that proposes haptics as a top-level media type was uploaded in May of this year. Next slide, please. So what has happened since version 2 was uploaded? I thought it was important to mention the latest developments in that area. The ISO-based media file format 7th edition, which is ISO 14496-12, has been approved and is listed under publication, and it's due out on the 3rd of December. And this is significant because it contains our proposal that we made back in April of 2020 that specifies haptics as a top-level media track in an ISO BMFF file at the same level as audio and video. So with this new standard, the new MP4 files, once this standard is implemented, will have haptic tracks along with audio and video tracks as well. That enables a more immersive media experience. And in somewhat in other areas of MPEG, we have the phase 1 CFP has been completed. Four proponents provided their codecs. 3 of them have been chosen as their reference model 0, and they are progressing to the next stage of the standardization. And in MPEG-I, which is the immersive media portion of MPEG, haptic use cases and requirements, we have almost 20 use cases and over 25 new requirements specifically pertaining to haptics. They have all been approved by the MPEG group, and they are moving forward. Can we go on to the next slide, please? So why are we asking for haptics to be a top-level media type? As I just mentioned, the user experience and enjoyment of media content can be significantly enhanced by adding haptics to audio-video content in the ISO BMFF files, in media streams and streaming games and mobile advertising. And here I want to respond to a question I got already this morning. And yes, haptics won't just be in files, but they will also be part of RTP streams and streaming games and wearable devices and XR applications is where we see haptics being used as part of RTP streaming. And also the next section here talks about how the MP4 files would would look like once the haptics top level type has been registered. So haptics/MP4 would be MP4 files with just haptic tracks in them. And for the sake of consistency, video/MP4 would stay video/MP4 for files which have the video, audio, and haptics, which it ensures consistency with existing video MP4 files. And the same goes for audio/MP4. Can we move on to the next slide, please? For the human sense of hearing, we have the top level media type called audio. For the human sense of seeing, we have the top level media type called video. For the equally important and kind of the last link, so to speak, for the human sense of touch, it makes perfect sense to have a top level media type called haptics. Placing haptics under audio or video or application is not reflective of the kinds of files or use cases that we would like, that would need haptics, and have nothing to do whatsoever with audio or video or applications. Move to the next slide, please. There are a number of sub-modalities of haptics. A few of them are already in the process, have found their way into the MPEG-I use cases and requirements. I mean, you have vibrotactile haptics, which is the touch vibration. You have kinesthetic, you have surface haptics, you have spatial non-contact haptics. This is an emerging field that is gaining a lot of traction in different areas called ultrasound haptics. You have thermal haptics. And so having haptics as a top level media type would enable the definition of the data formats pertaining to these submodalities in a more streamlined manner. This is not going to be possible if haptics were to be stuffed under an existing top level type like audio, video, or application. Can we move on to the next slide, please? There are a number of haptic data formats already in use around the world. The most common of them are AHAP, which basically began life in iOS devices, but now there are decoders available for Android and other XR systems. There is the OGG. In Android 11, Google introduced a proprietary extension to the OGG format specifically for haptic media. And there is the IVS format, which is used in a number of mobile phones in Asia from LG and Asus. And then the HAP format has also found use among a number of game developers around the world. And more importantly, we envision the following standardized haptic coding for formats that we expect to be registered soon, and they would live as subtypes under haptics. One is the HMPEG, which would be the outcome of the MPEG call for proposals that I was just talking about, and the HIEE, which is IEEE P1918.1.1 coding standard that is currently under ballot in IEEE and will probably be out much sooner than the HMPEG. Can you move on to the next slide, please? So this is actually, I think, my last slide here. We believe, based on the arguments I've made so far, that haptics doesn't really belong under any other media type. And the main reasons, just to reiterate, haptics connects to a sensory system, touch, motion directly, and is more specific than the abstract application type. Application has historically been used for applications that is code, means that is viewed and treated with great care for security, for viruses, and other active code. Haptics is not code in much the same way audio and video are not code either. Haptics is a property of a media stream. It is not an application under any normal definition. As such, we believe it should be its own type. Next slide, I believe, would be the thank you and questions. So.
Hi, I seem to have bagged the queue. Yeah, I was going to say the summary of the discussion so far, as I see it, is that one, the use of top-level names don't give rise to any critical concern that we need to be particularly concerned about. And number two, if we file this new haptic stuff under a new top-level name, it's going to be much easier going forward for everybody concerned, because this is not going to be the definitive haptics format. That's not going to be coming for quite a while. Putting them all under one umbrella is going to help people navigate this space, so let's just do it that way. But on the code thing, I have an image format that has code in it. I send G code to my CNC machines, and that's moving around. So anyway.
I guess I'm up. Just to clarify what Phil just said, you said the use of top-level names does not give rise to critical concerns. Does that mean the creation of new ones, or are you speaking retroactively that we're fine with the way top-level ones have worked so far? I just wanted to clarify what you mean there.
Basically, I'm saying that the discussion that we had the first time was saying we didn't find any dragons. We don't need to worry about breaking things by creating a new top-level domain here. There's no special magic. There's no special advantage. There's no special reason not to. So let's do it.
Thanks. That's what I want to clarify.
Harold, if you're talking, we couldn't hear you.
Forgot to unmute. No, the MP4 example was illustrative. The haptics will occur in files that have previous definitions because they're going to extend their definitions to allow haptics. So registration of those under haptics will only have an advantage for saying that this is stuff that makes sense if you don't have audio or video output, but just have haptics output.
Yeah.
Perhaps some choosing there. Jonathan?
Yeah, so I guess 2 points. John, on the general question of, whether, I've said this in the Jabber, but I'll repeat it for the meeting. The question of, whether a new name is a concern. I'd say in a new name, it's not a concern for any types which would otherwise have to go under application like this, for instance. I mean, I think as we found in the chat, there's some special cases for existing top-level types that are special cased, but anything which would otherwise have to be under application would be in the grab bag anyway. So a new device would treat them as unknown type, whether it's under application or under a new top-level type, and that's fine. So I think, I'm not going to say a new top-level type, for having a new top-level type for a new kind of multi-part would cause havoc. Having a new top-level type for haptics is absolutely fine. The other question I had, which is related to the issue that was just raised about MP4, is there's kind of an implicit hierarchy in that, obviously many formats like MP4 contain more than one type. And so we have this rule that if it only has audio, it's audio. If it has audio and video, it's video. And so I guess haptics has the same property. And so I think from what I read, or remember of your presentation last time, haptics is kind of the bottom of that hierarchy, which is to say, if it's only haptics, it's haptics. If it's haptics and audio, it's audio. If it's haptics and audio, it's video, it's video. So is that specified in? I haven't actually read your document, I'm afraid. Is that specified in the document that would register the top level type? That
Yes, I mean, just to clarify, the reason we have it that way is because haptics is the newest kid on the block, and we don't want to rock the boat. And so if it's audio and haptics, then you probably want to keep it as audio / MP4. But if it's haptics only, then it makes sense to say haptics.
I think this should be not just because it's new, but in 15 years when haptics is old hat, we're dividing a new container format, we probably still want to have this rule that if it's haptics and audio, you call it audio.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's and then I think we want to explicitly call that out, that in this, I'm not sure the audio and video, was that explicitly called out in the original definitions of the top level types that audio and video is video, or did everybody just assume that was the case?
No,
I
I think it was called out,
Okay.
if I recall. I mean, if it's audio and video, then it gets video/MP4. So.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I think everybody knew it worked that way. I'm just wondering how explicitly that was said. So I think we want to explicitly say that yes, haptics you only put it under haptics if it's only haptics. If it's a combined thing, you put it under the rules for the combined thing. I mean, maybe you already say that. I'm afraid I haven't read your draft and I apologize. So I think that
question whether that's a property of MP4 or it's a property of the top level domain hierarchy.
that's an interesting question too. And maybe we don't need. I mean, I guess I don't know.
Yeah, so that sounds like nobody seems any big problem with this. Also, there's no particular technical advantage or disadvantage to using haptics at the top level type. There's more or less all appearance. It looks better. Dave.
So I put this in a chat. So I think in one of Jonathan's comments, he talked about, maybe browsers or middle boxes or whatever take image formats and stick them into, say, image tags in HTML. And the more we see haptics being included in standards, whether it's MPEG or other things, I wonder if there's some chance that W3C would start adding haptics tags like an image tag, and if so, that's another reason why there's an actual technical benefit to having a haptics as a top-level domain type if it helps creation of dynamic HTML. So just wondering, I don't know if that will ever happen, but it is a possible thing to keep in mind.
I'm sure there's someone in the W3C who are thinking about haptics at the moment, but I haven't talked to them. Murray.
Yeah, actually, Harold, if you go to slide 13, which is in the backup slides, I actually have a slide on the W3C haptics work. There you go. So we added this as one of the justification slides, but we wanted to have it in the backup in case this came up. Right now, they don't yet have a well-defined haptic format, and I think they would benefit having haptics as a top-level type there as well. But they are working on a vibration API for gamepads. I mean, they have a vibration extension for gamepads, and they have an API that's implemented on Chrome and Firefox for Android.
Okay, Murray.
Is the plan to adopt this as a working group document and process it that way? I can't remember. I can't remember exactly, and I wanted to recap that.
The plan is to ask that question, and
okay, right.
Yes, it's one possible answer.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping your process. I just wanted to. The reason I asked that is because if we do that, then I want to make sure that WC3 comments on it before we process it. But that's it. Thanks.
Yep. Of course, all results of opinion polls in the room are going to be backed up with asking the same question on the list, and that will also give time to consult the W3C. Are we done with this topic now? I'm saving all the polls for the end. They're actually asking questions of should we adopt this? Okay, I'm closing the queue and moving on.
Okay.
The next
presentation. Thanks, Harold.
Yep, thank you. Let me see. Stop. No, that was not stop slideshare. Share previous slides. And this is multiple suffixes.
Hey, Harold, this is Manu. I have some updated slides. I can share them, but it's fine. We don't necessarily need to. I just captured your questions in the new slide deck.
Yeah, you can present if you want to. And remember
Okay.
to send me the slides afterwards so I can, or if you can, I'm not sure how this works.
Okay, I think someone's got to give me
Yeah.
the ability
Drone
to
screen. Yeah,
screen
there's the button.
share. There we go. There we go. Got it. Thank you.
And if you turn
All
on
right.
the video, we can see you.
Sorry, I don't have a camera on my workstation. My apologies. Static image only. Did you want to say a bit more, or do you want me to just kind of
Oh,
jump
go
in?
ahead.
All right.
Shoot.
So this item is about multiple suffixes in media types. Just really quickly, we're going to look at the problem space, talk about the current draft a bit. There's some maybe pending concerns really that need to be discussed that Harold sent out and Mark weighed in on, and then maybe some next steps. I think folks should probably feel free to just ask questions as we go. There are only like 5 slides here. So real quick about the problem space. There's a question about how we should interpret media subtype names that contain more than one character. So there are examples here at the bottom. The top one is a real one that's being considered. The bottom one is just kind of an attempt to suggest that it may apply to other existing formats. But really, it's around, what do we mean with a structured suffix? Are structured suffixes allowed to have 2 plus signs? If we do that, what's the registration criteria? Do we even want to allow that? Things of that nature. This all came about because at least some of us in some W3C working groups tried to register something with 2 pluses in the name, and the response was, well, there's not a clear decision on what that would mean. So why don't we clarify what that means? All right. So what are some of the options here? One of the options is that media subtypes are opaque. They're defined by specification, and you shouldn't read anything into it other than what's already written. Right. So if you have 2 pluses in there, maybe the spec needs to say it, or maybe we should just not allow that at all. Another thing that we could say is media subtypes are structured, but can only be 1 level deep. I believe that's kind of sort of what's there today. But of course, defer to the experts on that. And then finally, media subtypes are structured. They can be many levels, and we need to clearly specify and define what it means to have, kind of multiple levels there. So right now, the current draft, so there's a draft out, right, that the W3C Decentralized Identifier Working Group put together. It's a really quick 1-pager that kind of suggests one way that we could solve this issue. So if we just look at one of the examples here, VC is a verifiable credential, W3C, rec, LD is linked data. That's a bit hand wavy, but there's the assertion is that there is a specification that defines that data model, and then plus JSON is a serialization of that. So the one suggestion on the way that we could read this is if it has a plus JSON extension on it, any media type, it can be processed as JSON. If it has a plus LD plus JSON, which is a registered type as JSON LD, it can be processed as JSON LD. But you could also point a JSON processor and get something reasonable out of it if you pointed at that media type. And then the final one is, we have 2 plus signs, in here, and that means that, it's a verifiable credentials data model expressed as a linked data model, which is more generic, which is then serialized as JSON. So the current draft basically says that's the way you interpret multiple plus signs in a media type. And of course, there are concerns around this, of course, right? So one of the concerns here is that the W3C did working groups already shipping stuff with multiple plus signs. It doesn't mean that we can go back and tell them, stop doing that, that's bad, do something else. But right now there's software that's implemented. Nobody has screamed that anything's broken on them yet, but clearly it doesn't have super broad deployment. Harold asked the question on the mailing list, is the order of the suffixes significant or meaningless, such that, so for example, VC plus LD plus JSON, is that the same thing as VC plus JSON plus LD? The current draft says the order has meaning. So there's a very specific way you're supposed to interpret it. The draft establishes that you can't just mix and match suffixes. They probably need to come in a certain order. Harold also raised the question of, are suffixes a bad idea and should we abandon them? Should they have no special meaning? There's a question raised on whether or not that ship has already sailed, meaning that we already have at least, plus XML and plus JSON. But, we could make the decision that, well, we're going to stop there. We're not going to allow, multiple kind of nested suffixes. And of course, there are other concerns, like I'm sure chat has raised a number of them. So this is kind of, discussion. The next slide is just kind of what are the next steps. And Harold, I think you said you wanted to defer that to the end of the meeting. So why don't we use this time to kind of raise concerns? Is anyone concerned with the current draft saying what it does? Or any other, concerns related to multiple suffixes or structured suffixes?
Okay, let's go to the queue. Dave.
So, sorry, I've not read the draft, but I thought your explanation was great. The second bullet of the slide confused me because what it says to me on the screen and what I heard in audio don't seem to match. So I had a clarifying question. Because I thought what you said was that the order does matter. And what the slide says is the order the same if you switch them around, and the current draft says yes.
I'm sorry, yes. Yeah, that's confusing. The current draft says that order has meaning.
Okay, then personally, I like the direction that you're going. I think that the order should be significant. I think that the example that you showed on the screen of the 3 different interpretations of that one was a good example. You don't have to go to it, but I'm saying, that one. I tend to like that direction. I don't see a problem with that. If the order was not significant, I would see problems with that, right? If you had an unrecognized one, then trying to deal with all possible shufflings, I think would just get too complex, and I'm scared of that. And so if order is significant in what you showed here, I may not be the expert on this, but this looks reasonable to me, so I think you're going in the right direction.
Great, thank you.
Phil.
I like this. I support working on it. I've come up with basically exactly the same issue with wrapping. I have JSON data structures. I wrap them in a cryptographic envelope, and that JSON data structure has a semantic. I do take issue how I agree that the order should be significant. Where I differ is I think that the media type should be interpreted in the opposite order. When I see that, I see application, I see it's a VC first. So that's telling me that the semantic is VC. The subsemantic is LD. And then within that, I've got it encoded in JSON. So I'd use exactly the same order. But here's how it's going to matter. When we are registering these things in the IANA registry, there's going to be a top-level registration of application/VC. Now, the question is, are you going to have a sub-registry of what the interpretations of the things that come after mean, or are you going to have that controlled by application/VC? I mean, if this becomes a thing in content media type world, that means application/VC star anything afterwards, or rather application/VC plus anything that follows has to be governed by a draft that talks about is listed under application/VC, and so on. It might be that you eventually come up with plus JSON. If you specify a plus JSON, it must mean the same thing across the whole IETF, because it would be ridiculous to have plus JSON meaning it's in XML. But maybe we don't need to write rules for that, because people probably won't be that silly.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point, Philip. I think one of the challenges here is that I don't think there is such a thing as application/VC. The VC, it's kind of an abstract. It is an abstract data model, and you could argue that the linked data thing is an abstract data model as well. It has no, it exists in kind of the math sense, but it doesn't serialize until you shove it to JSON. And so I think there is concern there around VC is an abstract data model, LD is an abstract formally defined data model, but it doesn't spring into existence until you serialize it to JSON or CBOR or things of that nature. And so I don't know how to actually address that concern, right? The other thing that we're struggling with here is verifiable credentials is kind of a subset of a linked data model. So it feels that it's going more specific. Sorry. More specific from an application area.
We do run out of time now. We have 7 minutes left. So
this is a concern.
I'm going to close the queue in a moment, and then please speak shortly. We have questions to ask. Okay, Mark.
There, the little graph is moving. Okay, so if I've been following the Jabber, and I think we're kind of resolving to a place where we agree that you'd register, JSON or LD plus JSON as a structured suffix type. And then that would allow someone to register a media type of application, VC plus LD plus JSON or whatever. And if that's the case, it makes me wonder if the only thing we really need to do here is to clarify that structured suffixes can include the plus character. Just clarify that little point, which the draft, the RFC, I think is currently ambiguous about. And my question is that enough? And I'd like to hear what people think. If we just did that, or do we need to go into the potential swamp of what structured suffixes are and how you might process them and so forth and so on? I'd be a little wary of doing that because I don't know where that's going to take us.
So we do have the question of does plus LD plus JSON need to obey the rules for plus JSON? Anyway, I think we have to ask our questions now. Let me see if I can get to share some slides again. So I have 3 question slides, 1 for each topic, and I'm going to try to use the tool for them, and the tool that seems to allow only yes and no answers. So I'll just show
clarifying questions. Oh,
so We are 21 people, so we'll see how many people want to state an opinion. Okay, I think that's probably long enough. We got a clear majority saying that yes, we need such a registration procedure. But I have to check if I ask. Should we adopt the HATIX draft? I remind everyone that adoption as a working group document does not mean that we agree to everything that is anything or everything that is in the document. Oops. That was quick. I think we have.
Do you have
what?
Harold, do you have the numbers for those? I just realized I hadn't kept.
Yeah, no, so for the first one, it was 10-2. And the second one was 14-1. No, 14-0. And the question 3, should we adopt the suffixes draft? Please click the buttons now. And I'm going to call this a rough consensus in that we got 10 for and 0 against. So we have a series of rough consensus in the room, and we'll take it to the mailing list for confirmation. And if those hold up on the mailing list, then in a week or so, I would expect the draft authors to submit the drafts again with the drafts IETF Media Man name. So, anyone who wants a last word? Murray.
Yeah, just briefly, I am looking for a co-chair to back up Harold in this working group. If anybody is interested, please reach out to either of us and let us know.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we're at time and we're done. Thank you very much for coming, and see you all on the list.
Thanks, Aaron.